Let's listen to more of what Congressman Joe Neguse had to say.
Think for a moment, just a moment, of the lives lost that day, of the more than 140 wounded police officers, and ask yourself if as soon as this had started, President Trump had simply gone on to TV, just logged on to Twitter and said, "Stop the attack." If he had done so with even half as much force as he said, "Stop the steal," how many lives would we have saved?
And then, of course, others, Congressman Castro and Cicilline, took us through in detail what Donald Trump did not do. And the phone calls that he did make, the tweets that he put out, that were never condemning anything that was happening at the Capitol.
It's the most important point in this whole trial, because I think, to me, the greatest trick that Donald Trump ever pulled was he convinced people to think of him like the guy down at the end of the bar who's only there to criticize and maybe entertain, but doesn't have any real responsibility. When this guy was the president, he had more power and therefore more responsibility than anyone else in the world, definitely anyone else in the United States. And he didn't use it to protect us. And in fact, he was so powerful that he was the person who could incite the attack and then control the response to it. And by control, he did not choose to control the response to it. So I'm happy that they have shown that as clearly as they possibly could. And I think one of the sneaky things that the defense tries to do, and they try to do it in his last impeachment trial too, is they try to get the public thinking about Trump like he's the average American put on trial, and that he should have all the same rights and protections that you would have in a criminal trial. But of course, this isn't a criminal trial, and he's not the average American. In a criminal trial, you're entitled to your own freedom, and you're presumed innocent for that reason. But no one is entitled to be the president. And so being the president comes with this whole set of incredible responsibilities. And his failure to live up to those responsibilities, his choice not to, that's what's on trial. I mean, it's really a dereliction of a duty that he was supposed to assume. And I think if we can be successful in putting it in that light, people will understand why you have to see the whole course of conduct, all the things that he said, all the things that he didn't say, as Joe was pointing out in that clip. And that is what makes all of this a betrayal of his oath of office. It's not one statement in isolation. It is this entire failure to live up to, what is supposed to be the most powerful office on earth.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.